A thin mist clings to the crooked streets of the village, curling through the gaps between timbered houses like a living thing. It seeps into every crevice, into the cracks of worn cobblestones, into the crooked windows that lean wearily against the weight of centuries. The air is thick, damp, heavy with the mingled odors of smoke, wet earth, and human neglect. It carries the sharp tang of unwashed bodies, the sweet rot of spoiled vegetables, the faint, bitter metallic bite of dried blood that lingers in the corners where children have fallen and scraped themselves against stone. This mist, gray and restless, does not merely cover the village. It inhabits it, pressing against the skin of those who still cling to life, testing their resolve, and whispering the cold truth that survival here is never simple, never gentle. Children huddle beneath the sagging eaves of the houses, their limbs thin and frail, ribs pressing sharply against threadbare tunics. They watch the fog curl through the streets like spectral fingers, listening intently for the faintest signs of life. The cries of their mothers drift from distant fields, carried in broken bursts across the barren land. A shout of hope, a scream of frustration, the low groan of exhaustion that never ceases. Each sound is measured, weighed, cataloged. Each silence is equally loud, filled with threat and anticipation. They know, even at this age, that the world is patient only with the patient and ruthless with the unprepared. Hunger has carved its mark into their bones. The sharp angles of their small bodies are testimony to the years of deprivation, and yet their eyes burn with a quiet, stubborn intelligence. They know fear, yes, but they know it as one knows a shadow at dusk, a constant companion that can be outwitted or at least endured. The earth beneath the village is cracked, dry, and unyielding like the skin of an old man, unrelenting underfoot. Even the roots of the few remaining plants push weakly against the stubborn soil, offering only bitter sustenance. Leaves torn from frostbitten shrubs are munched with gratitude, not pleasure. The fields beyond the village are barren and brown, ridged and fissured by the sun that has refused to relent, and even the shallow watercourses have dried to shallow rivulets, whispering secrets of scarcity. Every patch of life that survives is contested. Hunger gnaws sharper than the cold wind that whips through the streets, slicing under the eaves and into every crack where a child might hide. Hunger is a tutor without mercy. It teaches calculation, patience, and courage far beyond the years of those who endure it. In the shadow of the castle, the disparity between the worlds could not be more cruel. Massive stone walls rise, imposing, cold, and absolute, protecting the feasting and the laughter of the rich. Torches glow in the courtyards, reflected in polished stone, and laughter rolls like warm honey across the air, distant but palpable, an echo that brushes against the children's ears like mockery. Platters overflow with roasted meats, thick bread, and exotic fruits. Wine pours in silver goblets, crimson liquid catching the torchlight as it swirls in careless abundance. Guards stroll idly, unburdened by hunger, their boots clicking against stone, marking time with the indifferent rhythm of a life untouched by suffering. Behind these walls, warmth, comfort, and abundance are measured not in persistence, but in entitlement, and the villagers feel it, the contrast, as a physical blow. One boy sits alone at the threshold of his home, clutching a rusted horseshoe in his small, dirt-crusted hands. To an onlooker, it is a piece of twisted metal, valueless and cold. To him, it is the architecture of hope, a talisman against absence, a charm that promises bread when the dawn comes, even if the world insists otherwise. He turns it over slowly, the metal rough against his fingertips, its curves catching what little light filters through the fog. His knees are scraped raw from stumbling over cobblestones, his hands cut and calloused from the labor of survival. The coppery tang of blood mixes with the dampness of the night, a bitter taste he accepts without complaint. Each scrape, each wound, is a testament to endurance, a medal awarded not by kings, but by circumstance itself. He lifts his gaze toward the sky, a dull gray canvas heavy with mist, and notices a lone crow circling above. Black against gray, it moves with deliberate patience, a sentinel in a world of uncertainty. Its caw slices through the cold air, sharp and isolated, and the boy listens intently, as if the bird carries messages beyond his comprehension. Perhaps it speaks of danger, perhaps of opportunity, perhaps merely of the persistence of life in a world that seems determined to erase it. He imagines the crow watching the castle, the glowing torches, the feasts behind walls of stone, and the stark difference in fortune humbles him, sharpens his awareness of both injustice and survival. Across the street, a widow tends to a single candle in her window. Its flickering flame casts shadows that dance across the walls, painting fleeting stories of sorrow and remembrance. Smoke coils from the wick, twisting into delicate spirals that disappear into the mist, like prayers being offered to a world that does not answer, yet must be addressed. Perhaps she prays for those who have been lost, perhaps for those who endure. In this village, prayer and survival are inseparable. Each candle lit, each whispered word, each sigh exhaled into the cold night is a small act of resistance, a statement that life, however diminished, persists. The castle bell tolls in the distance. Its sound is deep, resonant, and hollow, echoing across the barren fields. Here, it is a reminder not of celebration or duty, but of absence. The villagers hear it as a marker of the disparity between their existence and that of those behind stone walls. It vibrates through the marrow of the bones of the children and adults alike, a signal that the world beyond their village continues, indifferent, and that life must be claimed, earned, or stolen here in the shadow of plenty. Mothers return from the fields, shoulders bent, hands empty, faces streaked with soot, sweat, and tears. Fathers, if present, are stooped figures in the marketplace, their presence thin but determined, negotiating for a handful of grain, a scrap of bread, or a promise that tomorrow will be slightly more forgiving than today. The boy rocks gently on the threshold, the horseshoe pressed against his chest. His mind drifts across the calculus of survival. Which roots to dig first? Which leaves are least bitter? Which rats in abandoned barns might serve as morsel for desperation? Hunger has shaped him, sharpened him beyond his years. He has seen death brush past neighbors and friends. He has watched it turn the strong to whispers, and yet he continues. Each movement, each breath, each glance is precise, calculated, deliberate. Survival is not instinct alone. It is intelligence married to endurance. Wind rises suddenly, a sharp, wet whisper through the crooked streets. It carries the sense of distant fires, of iron and blood, of the smoke from kitchens and hearths alike. The boy shivers, but he does not retreat. He knows that movement wastes warmth, that panic wastes energy, that attention is currency, and in a village such as this, currency is scarce. He listens. The moan of the mist through chimneys, the rustle of leaves in abandoned gardens, the faint cough of elders whose breath is a fragile thread clinging to life. The night itself feels alive, as if aware of each struggle, each act of resistance, each pulse of hope. Shadows stretch long, consuming alleys and courtyards. Silence dominates, but it is a tense silence, one pregnant with anticipation, with the constant threat of loss and the faint glimmer of gain. A dog barks in the distance, startling the mist, then is gone. The candle in the widow's window flickers lower, casting longer, quivering shadows. The boy interprets the smoke's spirals as omens. The shape of a parent's face, the skeletal form of a stripped tree, the silhouette of a crow poised on the ridge of the castle wall. In every shadow, he reads the language of absence, longing, and endurance. The boy rises, careful, deliberate. His small feet press softly against the damp, cracked earth. The horseshoe swings loosely from his fingers, catching faint glimmers of light, as if carrying the possibility of another day. Even in the quiet, the village moves with him. Each house, each street, each shadow is alive, participating in a subtle rhythm of existence. Life persists in spite of hunger, in spite of despair, in spite of absence. Above him, the crow circles still, patient and watchful, black against gray. Its flight marks the passage of night, a constant in a world that offers little constancy. Somewhere beyond, dawn waits, patient, indifferent, inevitable. But here, in these fog-wrapped streets, the boy carries the village, its fear, its hunger, its faint glimmers of hope, in his chest and in his small, calloused hands. Survival is not heroic. It is elemental, raw, and demanding, and he knows it intimately. He moves forward, slow, deliberate. The fog bends around him. The candle smoke rises into the mist, and the distant laughter from the castle ebbs and flows like an indifferent tide. Each breath, each heartbeat, each shuffle of small feet against cold earth is a declaration. Life persists. The village breathes with him, shivering beneath its weight of absence and endurance. Every shadow, every rustle, every caw of the crow is testimony to the persistence of life against the indifference of the world. And as the night deepens further, the boy pauses for a moment at the corner of the street. He closes his eyes, tasting the cold mist, the copper of his own blood, the smoke from distant fires. He imagines warmth, bread, and the comforting weight of a parent's hand. And though the night is long, though hunger gnaws deeper than frost, he carries within him the quiet, stubborn insistence of life itself, a fragile, luminous ember in the gray, waiting for the dawn that will one day arrive, patient and unrelenting. The river, swollen with autumn rains, drags refuse and fallen leaves and languid currents, a dark ribbon threading through a world already heavy with despair. Its waters carry the scent of damp earth, of rotting wood, and the faint, bitter tang of mud, mingling with the iron scent of blood from wounds left unnoticed. On its banks, children crouch, their thin frames bent in quiet, almost ritualistic labor. Their hands, emaciated and trembling, sift through thick clay, appending roots and worms, searching for life in a world that has grown indifferent. Fingers slip in the slick mud, nails blackened and raw. Yet each small success, a worm unearthed, a root freed, is a victory against hunger that gnaws deeper than any winter chill. Their bellies hollow, ribs sharp beneath frayed tunics. The children listen to the church bell tolling across the town. Each strike vibrates through the chilled air, echoing off the narrow stone streets and over moss-laden roofs, marking a world of plenty they are forbidden to touch. The bell's resonance seems almost cruel in its persistence, counting the hours of abundance, of warm bread and simmering stews, a rhythm of life they can observe but never join. Their wide eyes follow the smoke rising from distant chimneys, imagining the warmth of hearth fires, the comfort of bread breaking in hands no longer cramped with cold. Mothers move silently through the shadowed alleyways, gaunt figures whose movements are measured, cautious, honed by months, perhaps years, of fear. They carry scraps stolen from neighbors' pantries, cloth bundles clutched to their chests, the fabric darkened with soot and the faint wetness of rain. The smell clings to their hair and skin, a mix of smoke, rot, and the sharp bite of fear. Each step is a negotiation with both the law and the elements, for patrolling guards move along the main streets with eyes like hawks, seeking not only trespassers but the very spirit of survival. The mothers' faces, once soft and tender, are now maps of hardship. The gaunt cheeks, the hollowed eyes, the tight pursing of lips that have spoken prayers no one has heard. In a quiet corner, a girl traces the carved initials of forgotten lovers into damp stone walls. Her fingers are numb, raw from constant contact with cold surfaces, yet her hands do not falter. She presses into the grooves, imagining permanence where there is none. The initials are more than names. They're defiance, memory, hope inscribed into a world determined to erase it. Around her, puddles reflect the pale sky, moonlight cutting into them with a cold silver edge, as if even the heavens watch her small rebellion. Above, birds circle silently, their wings slicing through gray clouds, indifferent yet somehow accusing, a reminder that the children's fragility is under constant scrutiny. Even in cruelty, there is beauty. The wind lifts the last copper leaves from twisted branches, scattering them like flames across the mud. Hunger sharpens senses. The scent of distant smoke, the faint odor of cooking bread, the subtle rustle of a coin dropped in a purse. These details pierce their consciousness with sudden, urgent clarity. Silence has become its own language. A glance communicates danger. A tilt of the head signals retreat. Every sound, every flicker of movement is laden with significance, a code that must be understood to survive. Night creeps over the town, and with it a deeper cold that gnaws through threadbare cloaks. It settles into bones, stiffening them, turning joints into ice, yet the children do not surrender entirely. They huddle close, pressing their fragile bodies together in an instinctive warmth, whispering soft prayers or murmuring stories to keep despair at bay. Each whisper carries memory and hope, stories of a life before hunger, tales borrowed from older siblings or overheard from passing merchants. In the reflection of a puddle, the moon casts a sliver of light across their faces, revealing a spark that hunger and fear have yet to extinguish. The river itself seems alive, a constant companion and witness. It carries more than leaves and detritus. It carries fragments of lives and remnants of forgotten days. Old pieces of cloth, broken tools, and debris float silently, a testament to the town's neglect. Children reach into these waters with trembling fingers, fishing not only for sustenance, but for scraps of hope, for traces of a world they have been barred from knowing. They are learning that survival is not merely physical. It is the endurance of imagination, the cultivation of a small flame in the darkness, a belief that even in suffering, life can still offer fleeting beauty. The patrol guards walk their beat with rigid discipline, boots clanging against the wet cobblestones in a rhythm that becomes the heartbeat of fear. Every misstep, every inadvertent sound risks punishment. Mothers shrink into shadows. Children vanish behind crates, barrels, and the gnarled roots of leafless trees. Each alleyway becomes a theater of negotiation. Eyes flickering, posture stiff, breath held, movements minimized. Survival here is a dance performed on the sharp edge of law, fear, and hunger. Yet tenderness persists in stolen fragments. A child finds a small feather, white as the frost that begins to line the riverbanks, and holds it as though it were a token of fortune. A mother breaks her meager bread into uneven halves, sharing what she can afford in a silent oath of solidarity. In alleys slick with mud and shadows, bursts of laughter echo, fragile and defiant. The wind carries these ephemeral joys, as if reminding the world that life, even amid despair, clings stubbornly to itself. Even the smallest moments are imbued with symbolism. Mud becomes more than earth. It is proof of labor, of existence, of connection to something larger. Leaves spinning in the river's current mirror the children's own journey, drifting yet persistent, battered by forces beyond their control but refusing to disappear. The smell of distant pine or a faint wisp of chimney smoke becomes a reminder of warmth, of survival, of possibility. Hunger and fear transform perception. The world is not merely cruel, it is alive with signals, a symphony of survival and caution. The girl at the wall pauses her carvings, fingers smeared with clay and water. She lifts her gaze toward the river, watching its currents tug at branches and debris alike, a mirror of her own life. Small, fragile, yet unyielding. Above, birds wheel in widening arcs, their cries cutting the dusk with sharp clarity. They seem both accusatory and protective, witnesses to lives pressed against the edges of existence. She imagines that if she watches long enough, the river might return something lost. A coin, a scrap of bread, perhaps a fragment of hope too stubborn to drown. Night deepens, and the town exhales beneath a shroud of darkness. Fires flicker behind shuttered windows. Distant dogs bark, lonely and hollow. Wind rattles unlatched shutters, the town itself trembling with muted sorrow. And yet, in the shadows, life persists. The children's bodies press together, their faces turned to puddles reflecting pale moonlight, embody a quiet determination. They are learning the rhythm of endurance, that life, even in scarcity, persists, and that resilience is as much a shield as any weapon. Hours pass like centuries. Rain seeps through the walls, through the thin blankets, pooling at the edges of wooden floors. Still, the children endure, whispering, dreaming, counting each breath as a small victory. Their eyes are wide, drinking in every motion of shadow and light, attuned to every sound of river, wind, and distant guard. Hunger has taught them the sharpness of silence, the intimacy of shared warmth, the sacredness of fleeting joy. Each moment becomes a ritual of observation, calculation, imagination, and survival. In this crucible of cold and neglect, the children discover truths older than law or famine. They learn that life is not only measured in bread or firewood, but in the persistence of spirit, the small acts of rebellion against despair, the fleeting glimmer of hope that can sustain a soul through the longest night. In the reflection of moonlight on water, in the stubborn feather held against frost, in the carved initials of lovers long forgotten, they find fragments of permanence, whispers of eternity in a world determined to erase them. The river flows, indifferent yet eternal. Mud and leaves, refuse and remnants, float in a procession that mirrors the children's own fragile journey, drifting, battered, yet unbroken. Above, the wind carries the faint scent of pine and distant smoke, and the girl at the wall smiles faintly, imagining warmth, imagining life beyond the mud and cold. The children, gaunt but vigilant, hollow-eyed yet alive, had discovered a quiet, stubborn triumph, that even amid hunger, fear, and shadow, life endures. That resilience, however small, shines brighter than any torch, and hope, however fleeting, is never entirely lost. They wait, pressing into each other for warmth, listening to the river and the wind, eyes reflecting the pale moonlight, hearts tethered to survival and dreams. And in the pulse of flowing water, the whisper of autumn leaves, and the distant tolling of bells they cannot reach, they find a truth older than famine or fear. Life, in its most fragile forms, persists. And in persistence lies its own quiet, unwavering triumph, a promise that tomorrow may hold something more than absence. Frost drapes the village like a pale shroud, settling upon every crooked roof and brittle fence post, muting the world beneath its icy veil. The cold is alive, crawling along the edges of the cottages, sneaking through cracks in the doors and window frames, curling around bones with a whispered insistence. Smoke curls from half-roofed cottages, twisting and spiraling into the steel-gray sky, a fragile defiance against the frozen air. Each wisp rises slowly, twisting like a ghost, as if the fire within the hearts themselves is whispering to the heavens, pleading for warmth, for mercy. Outside, the wind hums through the skeletal trees, bending their blackened branches into trembling arcs, scattering shards of frost like shattered glass over the frozen ground. Inside one such dwelling, a boy crouches low, pressed to the cold floorboards, listening to the hollow rumble of his stomach. It is a sound that swallows the room whole, louder than the crackle of embers in the dying fire. Beyond the walls, the laughter of wealthier homes floats over the snow-draped fields, crisp and cruel, each note slicing through the silence like a knife. It is not mockery, it does not need to be, but it cuts all the same. He presses a hand against the floor, feeling the vibration of distant footsteps, the clatter of utensils, the movement of life he cannot reach. Hunger coils his chest like a living thing, gnawing, restless, and yet he sits still, listening, learning, surviving. The scent of damp straw rises from the floor, mingling with the faint sweetness of rotting apples discarded in the alley outside. They are bruised, frostbitten, barely nourishing, yet the aroma is intoxicating, a reminder of life that continues despite the cruelty of winter. His hands, pale and stiff with cold, clutch a carved wooden horse. Its edges are worn smooth, the paint long faded, the details of its mane and hooves blurred by time and handling. Once, it was a companion for wild imagination, a vessel for gallops across sunlit fields, races won and lost in the warmth of laughter. Now, it is memory and longing, a ghost of childhood that refuses to leave him entirely. He traces the lines with his fingertips, imagining the joy that once poured from this small piece of wood, imagining a world that might still hold moments of light amidst the frost and shadow. Across the frostbitten field, women bend over large wooden tables, kneading dough with relentless, ritualistic rhythm. Their hands are red and cracked from frostbite, but they work on, coaxing life from flour and water, weaving survival from mere substance. The dough is heavy in their palms, stubborn and cold, yet they press it, fold it, and turn it again, a small rebellion against the unyielding winter. Their eyes are hollow yet luminous, reflecting a fierce determination, a fire that refuses to be extinguished. Sometimes their lips part, humming soft, low tunes to themselves, melodies that tremble against the icy air, faint threads of warmth in a world of cold. Each movement is deliberate, each gesture a silent prayer that tomorrow might come, and with it, the hope of nourishment, of continued life. The boy watches from the edge of the field, breath fogging the open doorway, heart pounding against the cage of his chest. Lawmen pass through the village, cloaks dusted with snow flapping like dark wings, mounted on horses that kick mud and frozen ground into the faces of those left behind. The hooves strike rhythmically, an indifferent drumbeat that marks authority in motion. They do not pause, do not look, do not notice the children pressed against walls or peering from windows. To the boy, they are forces rather than people, distant and unknowable, their presence a reminder that the world does not bend to his will. Still, he watches, silent, absorbing their movements, learning their patterns, remembering each detail. Every encounter, even one of indifference, is a lesson in survival. A single bell tolls for the dead, its hollow resonance vibrating through the bare timbers of the village. It begins softly, distant at first, a low vibration that rattles the frost on the windowsills, and grows in intensity until it fills every corner with mournful echo. Each peal lingers longer than the last, threading through the blackened treetops, settling in hearts already heavy with hunger and fear. The boy imagines it tolling not just for the dead, but for the silent vanishings, for those whose bodies fade quietly into night, whose cries have been swallowed by the cold. He pictures the empty chairs at tables, the vanished hands that once kneaded bread, and he understands, with aching clarity, the fragility of life. Each heartbeat is a defiance, each inhalation a rebellion against being forgotten. Ravens gather atop the skeletal treetops, their black wings slicing the gray sky, circling as if guarding the village from above. Their caws pierce the silence intermittently, harsh, sudden, a reminder of death and survival intertwined. The boy's gaze lingers on them, tracing the arcs of their flight, feeling the weight of the omens they carry. There's an understanding in his chest, a recognition that the world is fragile, and yet, despite the omnipresent threat of hunger, cold, and death, life continues. He can feel it in the frost beneath his feet, brittle yet unbroken, and in the faint warmth of his own pulse, stubborn against the overwhelming chill. Night descends fully, swallowing the village in its labyrinth of shadows. Each alley becomes a corridor of whispered fears, each corner a potential hiding place for loss or discovery. The wind carries low, mournful voices, curling under doors and slipping through roof gaps, weaving a tapestry of whispers that are part horror, part hope. The boy imagines faces pressed to windows, eyes wide, mouths trembling, reflecting candlelight and fear, and he wonders who will endure until morning, and who will be claimed by the cold that bites with such insistence. Even in the smallest hut, shadows gather, merging into shapes that speak of hunger, pain, and resilience alike. Yet amidst the darkness, sparks of life persist. A shared crust of bread passes hand to hand, tiny fragments of warmth, sustenance, and solidarity. A whispered story travels between children, carried on breaths that fog the air, delicate yet unbroken. Laughter breaks out sometimes, small, trembling, fragile as frost on a leaf, but it persists, a soft flame against the winter night. These gestures, though ephemeral, carry weight. They are proof that the human spirit, though battered, remains unbroken. The boy presses his wooden horse to his chest, imagining it galloping across frozen fields and forests beyond the village, across landscapes where hunger is absent and warmth is not a memory, but a reality. In his mind, the horse races past lawmen, past frost, past the shadows that creep through alleys at night, carrying him into spaces where hope still breathes. That vision fuels him, a quiet ember of courage that refuses to be snuffed out. Outside, the village itself breathes in unison, a fragile symphony of endurance and small rebellions, each breath a testament to persistence in the face of relentless winter. Snow drifts over the blackened trees, settling on the fields like ash, erasing footprints, concealing the marks of those who have dared to venture beyond the cottages. Yet, the boy imagines paths that lead elsewhere, journeys beyond frost and shadow, into a world not yet touched by hunger, not yet whispered into despair. He dreams of faces, strangers, kin, friends, gathered around fires, sharing bread, sharing stories, laughing freely without fear. It is a vision that sustains him as much as the meager warmth of the hearth, a promise of more than mere survival. The night stretches on, silent but for occasional snaps of ice underfoot, the distant echo of the bell, and the wind that whispers through timber and frozen ground alike. Shadows lengthen, merging and reshaping with each passing hour. Yet even in that oppressive darkness, life persists. Every breath is proof, every shared warmth a rebellion. The boy feels it in his chest, in the small, stubborn flame that refuses to be snuffed by frost, hunger, or fear. And as he lays his wooden horse beside him and closes his eyes, the frost ceases to feel like a shroud. Instead, it becomes a canvas, waiting for life, for courage, for memory to leave its mark. He dreams of fields unclaimed by hunger, of laughter not meant to wound, of hands warm against the chill. Somewhere beyond the village, the bell tolls softly, almost reverently, calling not just for those who are gone, but for those who endure, who cling to the fragile thread of life with quiet insistence. The village waits beneath the frost, suspended between despair and the stubborn insistence to survive. In the dim candlelight, in the shared bread, in whispered stories, in the wooden horse held close to a boy's chest, small sparks shine brighter than the cold. They are fragile, yes, but persistent, tiny, luminous defiance against erasure. And somewhere, just beyond the horizon, the first hint of dawn creeps over the frost, a pale promise that life, though battered and tested, persists, endlessly resilient. Morning breaks with a bruised sky, a raw smear of violet and ash that seems to weigh upon the village rather than lift it. The air carries the scent of wet earth mingled with smoke, curling from the skeletons of collapsed cottages, where timber sags and thatch smolders, mourning the lives it once sheltered. A distant bell tolls from the church spire, each note heavy and deliberate, vibrating through the hollow bones of the town, calling both warning and remembrance. Its echo lingers, swallowed by the mist, as if even the air fears to carry the memory of what is past. Children press their frozen faces against the frost-laced windows, noses red and fingers numb. Their eyes, wide with a mixture of curiosity and despair, follow peasants bearing bundles of straw, barrels of meager grain, and whatever small treasures their hands can clutch. These offerings, modest to those who have never known hunger, are mountains to the young, glimmering with the promise of life that seems almost unattainable. They imagine warmth, bread, laughter, a life outside the grip of frost and fear, but such visions are fragile, as easily shattered as the cracked glass beneath which they stare. A girl sits apart from the rest, clutching a broken wooden doll. Its limbs are splintered, its paint flaked with age, yet she imagines it a companion, a guardian against the creeping void of emptiness that surrounds her. She whispers stories into its hollow eyes, of hearths glowing with fire, of hands to hold and voices to trust. The cold winds drift through the streets, slicing through threadbare clothes patched with every color of despair. Each step the children take across frost-hardened mud is a negotiation with the day itself, a gamble for warmth, for bread, for hope. Outside, oxen pull heavy carts laden with what little the manor could spare. Their hooves churn the mud into ruts, each step a drumbeat of inevitability, carrying supplies that may nourish some while leaving others to scavenge beneath, picking at discarded straw, grain, or whatever falls by accident. Hunger is omnipresent, stalking the narrow alleys like a silent predator. Even as the children move quietly, cautious of the watchful eyes of adults, the tang of iron drifts from somewhere beyond the village, a faint, bitter scent that lingers in the throat, a reminder that survival is never without cost, that every morsel won is a battle fought and perhaps a life lost elsewhere. The girl watches a crow land near a puddle, pecking at something invisible, its movements precise, purposeful. She imagines it a survivor like herself, claiming sustenance from a world that seems determined to deny her breath. She envies its freedom, the simplicity of its life, and yet finds solace in the creature's persistence, a mirror of her own desperate courage. Around her, the day stretches long, a tapestry of endurance stitched with silent suffering. Each movement carries weight. A footfall in the mud, a hand grasping at a scrap, a glance stolen toward a warm hearth glimpsed through a distant window. A cart creaks under the weight of its burden, wheels groaning as if in pain. Peasants bend low, straining to lift barrels, their hands raw and cracked, yet steady with determination. The girl's stomach twists with hunger, but her eyes linger on their effort, imagining her own strength hidden somewhere inside, waiting to be called forth. Even the wind seems to join the labor, whipping at cloaks and skirts, scattering straw across the frozen ground, stirring the smell of smoke and wet earth into something almost tangible, a memory of life before the ruin, a whisper of what might yet be reclaimed. In a narrow alley, a boy crouches beside a barrel, pulling out a blackened scrap of bread. He bites cautiously, as though testing its worth against some unseen judgment, then swallows with trembling lips. Around him, the others watch, their gazes shadowed with hunger and longing, yet softened by the shared understanding that small victories are sacred, that survival is an art of quiet patience. The girl tightens her grip on her doll, imagining it holding the bread, warming it between splintered hands, imagining that even broken things can protect and nurture. The village breathes with a rhythm of quiet suffering. Doors swing open, faces peek through cracks, and a muted clatter of labor rises and falls like the tide. Somewhere, a mother hums a tune, half melancholy, half prayer, her voice catching on the edge of smoke and frost. Children pause to listen, catching fragments of melody, and for a brief moment, the cruelty of the world lifts, replaced by a fragile thread of beauty, a heartbeat in the gray expanse of survival. Sunlight, when it comes, does not warm so much as reveal. The mud, the broken carts, the faces lined with worry and fatigue. Yet in each glance, there is defiance. Eyes that have seen too much yet refuse to dim. Hearts that have known hunger and loss but cling stubbornly to hope. The girl moves toward the puddle where the crow feeds, staring at her reflection in rippling water, her small frame dwarfed by the day's enormity. She imagines a field, green and yielding, kitchens filled with fragrance, hands held instead of empty. And for a moment, the world is not cruel, but alive, waiting for her to claim it. As evening approaches, smoke curls from chimneys that dare still to burn. Shadows lengthen, crawling across frozen mud, tracing the shapes of children huddled in doorways, of oxen standing weary under carts, of broken dolls clutched close to hearts that refuse to break. A final bell tolls from the spire, echoing through the village like a sigh of both warning and remembrance. The girl lifts her eyes, the bruised sky mirrored in their depths, and wonders if survival is enough, or if there is a life worth living beyond mere endurance. The crow flutters upward, black against the dying light, and she imagines herself rising in the same way, carried by a fragile, unspoken promise that somewhere, even here, life might yet bloom. The day closes not with triumph, but with quiet persistence, a murmur of courage stitched into every small act of survival. Each step, each glance, each scrap of bread, each whispered story to a broken doll, builds a fragile bridge to tomorrow. And as the village exhales beneath a sky bruised and weary, the girl follows the crow's flight in her mind, imagining a world where hunger is not the only companion, and where shadows give way to warmth, to hands held, to laughter remembered and regained. A chill wind threads through the half-ruined market square, twisting around the splintered stalls and the shards of broken carts like a restless spirit. It carries with it the scent of moldy bread, the sharp tang of urine from gutters long neglected, and a faint perfume of distant taverns, where laughter and firelight pulse behind closed doors. The fog clings to the stones, heavy and gray, wrapping the square in a muted silence that swallows sound, save for the occasional creak of a gate swinging on rusted hinges or the hollow clatter of a bucket rolling across the cobblestones. Children lie in huddled clusters upon coarse straw, their small bodies quivering beneath cloaks moth-eaten and stiff with frost. Their faces are pale, streaked with soot and tears, and yet in their eyes flickers a stubborn glimmer of something untouchable. Hope, defiance, a life that refuses to be claimed entirely by hunger. One boy, fingers blackened by the soot of the communal fire, clutches a coin of little worth. It is not gold, not silver, but copper tarnished by years of use. In his mind, it is a key a key to doors he cannot yet reach, to a world that seems impossible, a world where the bells of the high castle do not toll over empty bellies. Mothers move like shadows between the stalls, bending low over crates of bruised apples, handfuls of turnips, roots dug from fields that have not yielded well. Their hands clutch the meager harvest as though each morsel were a fragile life, and in some ways, it is. Eyes dart nervously, watching for soldiers, for thieves, for sudden misfortune, and their lips are pressed tight against murmured prayers. Bless this bread, bless this day, let it be enough. Each breath they draw carries both smoke from distant fires and the faint, lingering sweetness of dreams deferred. Above the square, the castle looms, a fortress of stone that seems to swallow the sky. Its banners flap violently in the wind, red and gold, symbols of power that mock the thin limbs and hollow cheeks below. Soldiers pace the battlements like mechanical guardians, their armor clinking, their gazes sweeping for threats real or imagined. The people below move with caution, but also with an instinctive rhythm of survival, bending to a life that offers them no favor. The castle and its banners are not mere decoration. They are a drumbeat of domination, a reminder of what cannot be touched, cannot be claimed, and yet cannot be ignored. Ravens gather on broken rooftops, black and gleaming in the dim light, their harsh cries forming a chorus that mirrors the children's own silent lament. They hop from chimney to roof tile, pecking at scraps, and their presence is both omen and companion, creatures that thrive and decay as the people below try to survive it. The wind carries their cries into the square, sharp and accusing, and the children pull their knees close, listening. Some of them imagine the birds are speaking, telling stories in a language they nearly understand, tales of misfortune and cunning, survival and betrayal. Each breath is tinged with cold. Each motion carries weight, a gravity born not of the body alone, but of circumstance. A woman bends to lift a basket too heavy for her shoulders, teeth clenched, eyes flicking to the sun that struggles to rise through the mist. A child lifts a crust of bread to share with a sibling, hands trembling, lips dry and cracked. Each act is small, almost invisible, yet pulses with the quiet insistence of life. Life, that stubborn flame, refuses to be extinguished even here, beneath the gaze of indifference and cruelty. The boy with the coin rises slowly, shivering, his fingers pressed against his chest where it rests. He imagines a marketplace not of ruin, but of plenty, where bread is warm and laughter spills over wooden stalls. He pictures his own hands unburdened by hunger, reaching for things that today seem distant and impossible. He steps over a broken crate, hears the soft groan of a horse tethered to a splintered post, smells the wet earth rising from the cobblestones. In that instant, he feels a pulse, faint, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there, of something unnameable, something that whispers he will not vanish. Not yet, not while the world still breathes around him. Across the square, an old man leans against a cracked wall, fingers drumming on the stone. His eyes are closed, and yet he sees everything. The ragged children, the women burdened with impossible care, the soldiers atop the battlements, indifferent to their struggles. He remembers when the square was alive with the smells of fresh bread and the sound of haggling voices, when laughter had not yet grown thin and wary. Memories like these cling to him like moths, fragile and desperate, and he shares them quietly with the children who pass too close, offering a half-smile, a whispered story of better days, a lesson in cunning that might keep them alive until nightfall. In the distance, a bell tolls, deep and sonorous, echoing from a cathedral or perhaps from the castle itself. Its voice travels over rooftops, across broken fences and empty wells, marking time in a world where time is an enemy as much as a companion. The children pause, mid-step, mid-breath, as if the sound has touched them in a place they cannot name. The wind swirls around them, lifting strands of hair, tugging at cloaks, carrying the scent of frost and smoke and distant fires. For a moment, the square holds its breath alongside them. And yet, even in this relentless cold, there are sparks. A girl shares a turnip with a boy, a gesture so simple it might be invisible to any observer who has not lived in want. A child begins to hum, a thin, trembling melody that threads through the square like a silver thread of light. The boy clutches his coin, imagines it as a lantern, imagining doors that might open, paths that might appear, a life beyond the rhythm of need and despair. The sun rises higher, though through fractured mist, its light is soft, pale, almost tentative. And in that light, the boy lifts his gaze, feeling a quiet pulse of something stubborn and alive, the unyielding insistence of being, the subtle defiance of life itself. The market square, scarred and weary, breathes with them, each soul a flicker against the cold, against the banners, against the weight of a world intent on erasing them. Shadows stretch long across the cobblestones, and for a fleeting moment, the day seems fragile, suspended, held together by stories, by whispered prayers, by the simple courage of the living. And as the boy walks toward the remnants of a cart, past the huddled clusters of children, past the weary mothers, past the silent, watching ravens, the world seems to tilt slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if acknowledging that even here, amidst ruin and hunger, life has not yet surrendered. The wind carries a last note of frost and smoke, and the square exhales with it. Somewhere, a story begins to take shape, a story of survival, of cunning, of courage, of heart. And the boy, clutching his coin, steps into it. The night descends slowly, folding over thatched cottages like a velvet cloak, heavy with the weight of silence and frost. Smoke rises in thin, ghostly spirals from hearths where fires sputter weakly, starved of both wood and warmth. Inside, the air is sharp with cold and the tang of damp earth, seeping through cracks in walls and under doorways, curling around bodies pressed close for comfort. Children huddle in corners, knees drawn to chests, stomachs taut with emptiness, listening to the faint scrape of boots on wooden beams above. Each echo is a pulse of tension, a reminder that the world above them carries on, oblivious to the small hearts trembling below. A girl, no more than 7 winters old, fingers a frayed rope, imagining it a lifeline cast from heaven. Its coarse fibers bite into her skin, but she does not flinch. In her mind, it is a tether to a world where bread fills bowls, where laughter is not stolen by hunger, where frost cannot pierce flesh or hope. Her fingers trace the rope as if tracing memory itself, each knot a promise, each fray a testament to endurance. Around her, shadows stretch long, cast by sputtering candlelight that trembles against the walls. The shadows whisper of what is gone, of what may never return, yet they also cradle the tiny, stubborn flame of hope that refuses to be snuffed out. Outside, the distant clang of a blacksmith strikes through the frozen night like the heartbeat of the village. Each metallic hammerfall rings hollow in the ears of the children, a rhythm of labor that promises nothing to those too small to carry a hammer. The sound is both cruel and comforting, a reminder of a life that pulses beyond the walls, and yet remains unreachable. Beneath the cadence of iron against iron, the wind rises, sliding through the eaves in low, mournful whines. It carries the scent of wet wool, of cold stone, of iron tools left to rust in snow, and a faint sweetness of forgotten fruit, its flesh blackened and bloated beneath a crust of frost. Time itself seems to freeze in these scents, Memory and decay entwined like twin shadows that cannot be disentangled. Every step across the frozen earth outside is a negotiation with pain. Feet, encased in rags, press against ice, feeling every shard of cold that bites through fabric, bone, and sinew. Each inhale draws in the sharpness of frost, mingled with smoke and the faint tang of blood from unseen cuts or bruises. Breathing becomes an act of defiance, a quiet affirmation that existence persists despite want, hunger, and despair. Through the narrow windows, the flicker of torchlight dances over snow-dusted streets, illuminating faces etched with the same resolve that mirrors the girl's own. They are not yet broken, though the weight of the world leans heavily upon their shoulders, threatening to bow them into the dust. A single bell tolls the hour, low and mournful, its vibration trembling through the empty square. It resonates across rooftops, rolling like a wave through the still night, and in that sound, the children feel both grief and communion. The tolling speaks to loss, to absence, to the relentless march of time that claims what little the living hold. Yet it also binds them together, a shared heartbeat in the cold dark, a reminder that even in solitude they are not alone. Eyes meet in shadowed corners, glances brief, yet filled with silent understanding. They exchange no words, for none are needed. The vow is mutual, unspoken, to endure, to remember, to survive the cold embrace of the night, even if only for the fleeting promise of dawn. In the larger houses, where fire glows like a trapped sun, tables groan under scraps of bread and salted meat. Yet the children of the cottages know such warmth will never come to them. Hunger is a quiet companion, circling endlessly in empty stomachs and hollowed eyes, whispering in the language of longing. Yet they learn its rhythms, its subtle cues, the shiver before dawn, the hollow ache after moonrise, the way the body bends and curves to scarcity, never giving in entirely. Hunger shapes them as sharply as frost or iron. It carves resilience into their bones, etches patience into their hearts, and polishes instinct to a fine edge. From the blacksmith's forge comes a sudden spark, arcing into the night, and for a brief moment, it illuminates the frozen faces peering from windows. Eyes catch the light and hold it, fragile as icicles, clinging to warmth they cannot touch. The spark falls and dies, leaving the village cloaked once more in shadow, yet the reflection lingers in memory, a small ember of possibility in the otherwise unyielding darkness. The girl's hand tightens around the rope. She imagines it lifting her beyond the frost, the hunger, the despair. She imagines a place where the wind does not cut, where bell tolls announce joy, not grief. And though she knows such a place may be myth, the act of imagining alone grants her a breath of life, a pulse of courage that refuses to be silenced. In the distance, a dog barks, a sharp, solitary note that shatters and then dissolves into the night. Somewhere, a door creaks open. The scrape of a chair follows, then the low murmur of voices, grown-ups tending to chores, to fears, to the unspoken terror of survival. Each sound threads into the tapestry of the village, weaving the lives of many into a single narrative of endurance. The children listen, absorbing every nuance, the safety of shadows, the threat in silence, the rhythm of life that marches indifferent to suffering. They begin to understand the world not as it should be, but as it is, a place of cold, hunger, and fleeting warmth, where every breath taken is both a gift and a challenge. As midnight approaches, frost thickens on windows, tracing delicate patterns like lace spun by the wind itself. The girl presses her face close to the glass, watching shapes emerge and fade with the flickering candlelight behind her. Her breath fogs the pain, a temporary veil between her and the bitter night. She whispers names she has learned from memory, of friends and family, of people who once were and might yet be. Words are fragile in this cold, yet they carry the weight of survival, a bridge between what was lost and what might still be saved. Outside, snow begins to fall lightly, each flake a crystalline kiss of heaven upon the weary earth, softening edges, masking footprints, offering quiet reprieve. The children close their eyes as the snow drifts over the village, surrendering to sleep with minds heavy yet hopeful. Dreams are fragile here, colored by hunger and frost, but even in dreams, the imagination stretches to distant lands, to warmth, to abundance, to safety. The rope lies beside the girl, frayed but intact, a symbol of perseverance, of faith in unseen hands, of the tenuous line between despair and endurance. In these hours, they are small yet defiant, fragile yet unbroken, existing in the delicate balance between the cruelty of the night and the promise of day. And as the first gray hints of dawn stretch across the horizon, brushing the village in soft, silver light, the tolling of the bell fades into memory. The children awaken to a world unchanged in its harshness, yet slightly different in its quiet persistence. They rise, bodies stiff but spirits alive, carrying the weight of the night and the lessons it has written on their bones. Every step forward is deliberate, a negotiation with the cold, a pact with survival, a testament to the human spirit that refuses to yield. The rope remains a silent witness, waiting for the day when it may no longer be a lifeline, but a bridge to the world they imagine and may one day reach. In this fragile dawn, the village breathes as one entity, scarred yet enduring. The children move through streets layered with frost and memory, each footfall a soft percussion in the symphony of survival. They do not speak, but their shared glance tells the story. Grief and hope, hunger and resilience, darkness and the faintest glimmer of light. And in that glimmer, the world holds its promise, that even in the deepest cold, even in the longest night, life persists and the human heart endures. Dawn breaks pale and uncertain over a village swallowed by mud and frost. The sky is a bruised gray, thick with lingering mist that drapes itself over crooked timbered houses and the frozen remnants of once fertile fields. Each plank, each thatch, is etched with the memory of years of hunger, rain, and snow. Children stumble barefoot across the frost-hardened earth, their small feet leaving fleeting tracks that vanish almost as quickly as they are made. Their breaths rise in thin, wavering clouds, hanging in the cold air like whispers of despair. Every step sends shivers along their spines, not from the cold alone, but from a deep, gnawing emptiness within. Their bellies hollow beneath ragged tunics. Their stomachs ache with a hunger that has become companion to every waking thought. Fingers numb, they clutch sticks or broken toys, nothing more than shards of imagination in a world that has long forgotten indulgence. The scent of rot and wet straw clings to everything, the ground, the walls, the air itself, a stubborn reminder that survival is rarely clean and beauty rarely lasts. It is a smell of patience tested, of decay creeping silently into every corner of their lives. In the village square, a mother bends over, pressing a small piece of bread into a child's trembling hands. Her fingers are red and cracked, shaking from the cold and from exhaustion, yet her eyes burn with a quiet defiance. She does not speak, and the child does not ask, for words are fragile here, and fragile things break too easily. The bread is stale, small, almost laughable against the vastness of need, yet it is treasure, a promise that life, though battered, continues. Around them, the square is still, save for the occasional cry of a crow and the crunch of frost under careful feet. Each movement is a careful negotiation with the world, a dance of avoidance and hope, a test of endurance. Laughter, when it comes, is rare and brittle, snapping like thin ice underfoot. Children glance at each other with eyes that are too old for their faces, sharing moments of joy that sting with the knowledge of their fragility. The smallest joys are treasured fiercely. The glint of frost on a puddle, the soft warmth of a mother's hand, a whispered story told behind closed shutters. Even in these fleeting instants, shadows lurk, the gnawing reminder that each meal, each moment of comfort, is borrowed, temporary, and uncertain. Above, a lone raven arcs across the gray sky, its wings slicing through the mist like knives of night. It is a silent witness to the slow erosion of innocence, a herald of a world that does not pause for grief or celebration. Below, timbered walls hide ovens where bread bakes for feasts the hungry cannot touch, smoke curling upward in arrogant columns that mock the hollow stomachs beneath. The rich move in ceremony, cloaked in furs and gold, their laughter and music alien and unthinking. Their lives are contained in warmth and abundance, while just beyond their thresholds, children count stars through broken rooftops, imagining warmth where there is none. Each moment in the village is layered with peril and fragile ritual. Families scrape together roots, dried herbs, scraps of grain, and the tiniest finds become sustenance enough to stretch the night. Hands are raw from gathering, from cleaning, from tending to life in a world that resists tenderness. Eyes are sharp, scanning for danger or opportunity alike. In such a place, imagination becomes armor. A dream of the sun warming cold cheeks, of water running clear in a well, of laughter that does not fracture like glass. In the silence, each breath is measured, each movement weighed. As the morning mist rises, the children's eyes catch the glint of sun on frozen puddles. For a heartbeat, the world softens, the cruel edges blurred by light and reflection. They pause, toes sinking slightly into the ice, chests rising with cautious wonder. In these moments, fleeting and fragile, life whispers that it persists, even when it seems most determined to vanish. A branch creaks in the wind, the frost hisses beneath footsteps, and for an instant, the weight of hunger, fear, and the unrelenting cold is lifted, replaced with a quiet, tentative hope. Behind shuttered windows, the village stirs. Women pull on tattered shawls, men tighten belts and sharpen blades. Each motion a ritual, each gesture a negotiation with the day ahead. In cellars and behind porches, bodies huddle together for warmth, sharing whispers, stories, and memories that anchor them against despair. Even the poorest have their rituals, scraping together roots, imagining warmth, counting stars through broken rooftops, and giving names to shadows that move just beyond the torchlight. In these acts, the living assert themselves against the inevitability of the night and against a world that shows no mercy. Through it all, the village breathes a rhythm of endurance. The wind whistles between broken rooftops, carrying with it the cries of children and the smell of smoke and wet earth. Doors creak, pots clatter, and a murmur of survival threads through every corner, binding the living in a fragile communion. Every movement, every small act of care is laden with meaning, a hand stretched to a neighbor, a scrap of bread divided, a blanket wrapped tightly against frost. In such a place, community is both necessity and defiance. It is a quiet rebellion against the inevitability of loss. And yet, for all the hardship, life is stubborn. The children, with frozen cheeks and aching limbs, laugh when they tumble into a puddle that shimmers like glass. Mothers murmur prayers under their breath, not always for protection, but for endurance, for a day in which the smallest joys might survive. A dog trots along the edge of the square, ribs visible beneath its fur, tail wagging despite hunger, a reminder that even in suffering, life finds expression. The village is not merely a place of despair. It is a theater of resilience, each heart beating a defiance against the darkness. As the sun climbs higher, it illuminates the village in cold gold, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across frozen ground. Each shadow is a story, each glimmer of light a fleeting promise. And though hunger gnaws, frost bites, and sickness waits in the corners, the people move with purpose. A mother guiding her child, a boy breaking ice for water, a man carrying logs to a fire. In these small, deliberate acts, the fabric of survival is stitched, one fragile moment at a time. The day unfolds with quiet intensity. Every crack of wood, every sigh, every hurried footstep is poetry in motion, an intricate tapestry of desperation and hope, of fragility and stubbornness. Even the mud, the frost, the thin smoke curling from chimneys, carries with it a story, a memory, a warning. It is a reminder that the world is neither cruel nor kind, only demanding of attention, endurance, and the occasional act of bravery hidden in the ordinary. And as the morning yields to afternoon, the children pause again at the puddles, eyes bright with curiosity and wonder, fingertips brushing against ice that glitters like fractured stars. For a single heartbeat, the world feels less cruel. It is a fragile promise, a glimmer that life persists, even when the night was long, and hunger unrelenting, and frost had claimed everything else. The village breathes, shivers, and persists, a testament to the endurance of the human spirit, poised between despair and hope, darkness and the soft, cold light of possibility.